In this brief video, I want to talk to you generally about Transact-SQL. Transact-SQL is a database programming language that is based on the structured query language standard. Now, Transact-SQL is actually a proprietary extension to that structured query language standard. So as a result, you'll hear Transact-SQL referred to as a flavor of the SQL programming language. Now, this was actually created by Microsoft and Sybase way back when they started. So here's what happened. In the early days, we had flat file databases out there like DBase and Access and so forth, and everybody started to realize the advantages of relational databases, and there was a race to get relational database products out on the marketplace. And so Microsoft and Sybase partnered, and they were targeting that IBM OS2 platform. But what they found is that as the industry and as functionalities and market needs were evolving, the standards committees couldn't keep up. It's a committee of people, and they do great work, and they think things through, and they apply things in the best way. But Microsoft and Sybase said, wait a minute, we need certain functionalities in this standard query language that just aren't there right now. And the committees, it takes them quite a long time to get them out there. And so they just started to basically enhance that standard structured query language and added their own little tweaks and stuff in there. Now, that's happened in a lot of different instances here. And so as a result, we have multiple flavors of the SQL standard out there. Now, here's why I'm telling you all this. Transact-SQL is central to working with Microsoft's hugely popular SQL Server database platform. It is the language that's used to create, manage, and manipulate SQL Server databases, and really almost every aspect of SQL Server from that administrator's point of view. Now, understand, when you get out there into some of the data modeling, some of the business analytics, there are other languages that you'll utilize like DAX and MDX, but don't worry about that right now. For now, Transact-SQL is what you're going to use primarily 99.9999% of the time as a database administrator. Any application that communicates with SQL Server is going to do so using Transact-SQL. As a database administrator, this kind of falls on your shoulders because as developers out there start to write all kind of cool stored procedures and functionalities, and as program developers start to write these things, you as a database administrator are worried about your data, you're worried about what's going on with the data, the implications of this code that they're running. You need to have a working understanding of Transact-SQL so that you can understand what's going on and what's happening to your data and your server, because a poorly written or sometimes just the functionality that's being carried out by a certain piece of code is not as efficient as it could be. And sometimes you'll just have to analyze it and look and determine, is there a better way to do this? Is there a different way to go about taking care of this? Now, I mentioned Transact-SQL is one of the many flavors or proprietary extensions to the standard SQL language. There's a number of them out there. There's DB2, there's MySQL, which is the very popular open source version of the SQL standard, PL SQL that was used primarily by Oracle, and then there's many more. But here's the bottom line that you need to understand. Everything that you learn about Transact-SQL and your efforts at becoming an administrator on the SQL Server platform are directly transferable to these other flavors because they're all based on that standard SQL language. So I would estimate that probably 80% of everything you learn about Transact-SQL is directly applicable to all these other flavors. So if you get on a project where you're having to use some MySQL code, it's not that hard to grab a MySQL book or piece of documentation and say, now, wait a minute, how did they carry out this particular functionality? One look and you're like, oh, okay, so that's how they do it, all right? Because based on what you understand in Transact-SQL, you can easily translate that over and make it work. And by the way, O'Reilly Publishing has an excellent book out there called SQL, and it actually lists all the standard SQL commands and how the different flavors of SQL execute that. So if you're working in a cross-platform environment, take a look for that resource. What's the difference between the various flavors? Really, it comes down to minor syntax difference. Now, sometimes it can be a little bit major. Most of the time, it's minor syntactical differences, minor functionality differences. Just keep in mind, all of these SQL flavors are based on that SQL standard that's out there. And much of what you learn about Transact-SQL will translate directly to the other flavors. But as an administrator, you're going to encounter Transact-SQL in a lot of forms. So if you're not really comfortable with it, you need to invest a little time out there getting to know Transact-SQL, getting comfortable with various aspects of understanding these join queries that you're going to see, the stored procedures, the views, those sorts of things, because they're going to come into play and they're going to fall on your shoulders since you're going to be kind of the keeper of the data, if you will, as an administrator. Just keep that in mind and just sharpen up your Transact-SQL chops if they need it, because it's going to come into play and you're going to see some Transact-SQL aspects on the exam as well.